On a beautiful morning in a field with a quaint house and a serene lake in the background, a little girl named Marianne spots a carriage approaching with her parents aboard, and she's absolutely thrilled. Her mother, holding a baby, remarks that Marianne must have been lonely, but the little girl quickly refutes it, mentioning that she had Rose with her. Meanwhile, a man and a child are seen observing the house from a distance. The mother introduces Marianne to her new baby brother, Cheyenne, who stretches his arms out for a hug and receives a loving kiss from his sister. The baby is visibly surprised by the kiss, and his eyes glow with delight. 3 years later, Marianne is racing with Cheyenne and wins yet again. She teases him for being slow, while he counters that she's simply too fast. Marianne agrees, highlighting that as the elder, it's natural. During this time, their father opens the gate and the girl follows him, while she muses that his sister has too much energy. The father comments that Marianne is as lively as always, and she shares that, like the color of her hair, she is as bright as the sun. Subsequently, the father points out that Cheyenne seems as responsible as ever, but the boy feels his sister is more responsible, which she confirms again, citing her seniority. Privately, Marianne thinks that her brother is really responsible since he always helps their mother and has stopped wetting the bed. Moreover, he sometimes bears a worried expression as if he were an adult. Later, she observes Cheyenne making gestures and repeating phrases like fireball and wind gust. Curious, she asks what he's doing. He bashfully says it's nothing, but she knows he occasionally enjoys playing pretend and finds it amusing. When night falls and the family is dining together, Cheyenne asks if monsters really exist. His father affirms they do, explaining they are dangerous and attack humans, which is why the children must stay within the property boundaries. Cheyenne also wants to know if fairies and nature spirits are real. Though he has never heard of nature spirits, the father confirms fairies do exist but are rare, and some traders have become experts in finding them. Finally, the boy eagerly asks if magic also exists, an enigmatic energy capable of manifesting light and fire, but the father denies its existence. The boy considers that perhaps the father simply isn't aware of its real existence, but the father, while acknowledging there are things beyond his knowledge, insists that his education should be sufficient. He then asks where his son heard such stories. However, Marianne interrupts to ask if her brother is alright since he looks pale. After the boy reassures her that he's fine, she reflects that he never again brought up the topic of magic, a word previously unheard by anyone. 3 years on, Marianne trains with a stick until she's tired, then sits next to Cheyenne, who's holding a book. He asks why she trains so hard, and she replies that it's because she's the eldest and needs to be ready in case of trouble, like a monster invasion. Marianne discovers she's adept at such things and feels it's her responsibility to protect her younger brother. Thus, not being very scholarly, she finds her usefulness in physical tasks, which she can manage well. By late afternoon, Marianne continues her training by the lake. Rose can't fathom how the girl doesn't tire from all-day exertion, especially since she herself is worn out after assisting her grandfather. Rose notes that Shen spent his day studying as usual, highlighting how the siblings are complete opposites. This observation reminds Marianne that Cheyenne hasn't mentioned that topic for a long time, but she's certain she understands why he studies so hard. Suddenly, a shimmer overtakes the water in front of the girls, who stare in awe at it. The next morning, as the siblings walk together, Cheyenne recalls their mother's warning not to stray too far, but Marianne assures him there are no monsters nearby and pulls him by the hand to the lake. Once there, Cheyenne worries their mother will be upset with them, and Marianne thinks she might be, but it will be worth it. As soon as she says this, luminous spheres emerge from the water, creating a stunning display in the late afternoon. The girl explains that these orbs always appear at sunset, though she doesn't know why. After she discovered them, she brought her parents to see, but for some reason, they couldn't see the spheres. Now it appears Cheyenne can see them too. He wonders if perhaps adults are unable to see them, but his sister explains that some children also fail to see them. In fact, she shares that apparently different people perceive them differently. While the orbs flicker for Marianne, some children saw actual lights. Ultimately, this mystery feels like magic, she concludes, echoing Cheyenne's earlier words about how magic can create light. Cheyenne is surprised his sister remembers this, and she acknowledges her memory isn't great, but when it comes to her brother, she never forgets. Furthermore, it was after this discussion that Cheyenne began to seem very sad. After witnessing and discussing these phenomena, the boy finally starts to feel better. The next day, the siblings quickly finish their lunch, leaving their parents dumbfounded. They then run straight to the lake, where they've brought wooden buckets and fishing rods. Cheyenne tires from the exercise, and his sister comments on his lack of stamina due to his sedentary lifestyle, which he can't deny. With plenty of time before sunset, Cheyenne wants to explore the lake further. First, he aims to discover where the light orbs originate, suspecting they might come from a living entity within the lake. The plan is to fill 3 buckets with water, then add sand and rocks to one, aquatic plants to another, and fish to the last. Sometime later, they had done exactly as planned, except for catching the fish. While Marie fished, Cheyenne smiled and said he was very happy to have his sister by his side. To play the role of the older sister, Marianne explained that she would always be there for her younger sibling. Since this was something he wanted to do, it was only natural for her to help. Moreover, if something like magic really existed, she wouldn't want to miss out on it because life would be much more exciting if it were real. On this note, Cheyenne promised that if magic did exist, Marie would be the first person he would tell. Meanwhile, Marie's rod hooked something. She pulled an Eden trout from the lake and placed it in the last bucket as planned. Cheyenne asked if the trout was a common fish, and his sister confirmed that it was, as they could be found anywhere. Hearing this, the boy became less hopeful of witnessing something extraordinary. At that moment, Rose arrived and asked her friend if the boy was her younger brother. Marianne confirmed and asked the young man to say hi, since she had never seen that girl before. After his greeting, Rose introduced herself as a lonely flower blooming in this desolate village. Not really enjoying this talk, Marie hurriedly told her brother that the girl was just a commoner posing. Rose got angry, remarked that this was unnecessary, and then inquired what the people were up to. Marie explained that they were fishing, but what her friend didn't understand was why they would fish in that particular lake. To cut through the mystery, Marianne revealed that her brother already knew what was going on. Then Rose highlighted that those light orbs were indeed very interesting. Marie asked if her friend had also come to see the spheres, and she admitted that she occasionally came to witness this phenomenon. Excited about the topic, Cheyenne asked if the little girl knew anything about the light orbs, like what created them or what they were. However, Rose knew nothing. She just enjoyed looking at them and nothing more. As the hours passed, the sun set and the phenomenon occurred once more. Cheyenne and Marie looked at the 3 buckets, but none of them were glowing. The boy asked if there was anything else living in the lake that they could try to catch again. Marie thought there were many other things, but Rose believed it would be quite difficult to collect them all, especially since they couldn't even be sure how many things there were. With that, Cheyenne decided to enter the lake. Worried about her brother, Marie also began to remove her top clothing. Embarrassed, Cheyenne asked what she was doing, and she explained that her dress would get wet. Thus, the siblings ventured into the lake and made their way to the center of a spectacle. Cheyenne touched one of the spheres and said it was warm and ticklish, but the sensation was pleasant. Not wanting to be left behind, Marie did the same. Cheyenne then dipped his face into the water. As it was too murky to see the bottom, he understood that the light orbs came from something living underwater, perhaps even from a fish, because the source of the light was moving, although the boy couldn't exactly tell which creature was doing it. Since they couldn't see much more than that, the siblings left the lake. Cheyenne thanked her for the help, but Mary said they were a family and should always support each other, so there was no need to thank her for such a little thing. However, Cheyenne felt the need to make it clear he was grateful because even though everything she had said was true, that didn't mean he should hide his feelings. Amidst this, Rose displayed an Eden trout female she had caught. According to Marianne, the females lived deeper and were harder to catch than the males. But since it was spawning season, they came to the shallow waters. Suddenly, the light orbs began to emerge from the bucket with the trout couple, and everyone was astonished. With this, Cheyenne began to believe that this phenomenon was the mating action of the Eden trout. As Marie didn't understand what that meant, Rose explained that it was when someone asked another person to marry them. Marie then thought she didn't need to ask anything of her brother, but eventually, she would have to lay eggs. Embarrassed, Cheyenne yelled that Marianne wouldn't lay eggs and that siblings couldn't marry. However, the girl took this as if her brother didn't love her. The next day, Marie reported that her mother was angry because she had said she was going to marry Cheyenne. The mother had said the same thing as the boy. Because of this, the child felt guilty for thinking she had said something very bad, but she emphasized that she only wanted to stay with her brother. Cheyenne explained that they didn't need to marry for that, but the little girl thought it would be much more special that way. If they didn't marry, they would have to marry other people and would never be together again. As his sister began to cry after saying this, Cheyenne ended up saying that he would marry her. Marie asked if this wouldn't be a problem for their father. Then the boy said that if it were a matter of an heir, they could simply adopt someone. The girl replied that it didn't seem easy, but Cheyenne swore he was serious. Even though he was still a child after all, he also wanted to stay with his sister. If she wanted, he could even make a vow. According to Marianne, that was a heavier responsibility than saying they would marry, but the boy didn't think that was heavy for him because Marie was very important in his life. Having said that, Cheyenne hugged his sister and assured her that everything would be alright because he would always be by her side. When Marie cried and hugged her brother back, a light shone around Cheyenne. He believed it was magical energy because the light resembled the light orbs from the trout procession. Maybe, after observing that phenomenon so much, it had imprinted on his body. After all, saying he wouldn't marry anyone else was the greatest confession of love. Startled, Marianne ran out of the room while Cheyenne realized that he had discovered magical energy in a world where magic didn't exist. For that reason, he promised to create this art in this universe where he had reincarnated. Suddenly, we are transported to modern-day Japan, where a man counts down the last 10 seconds until midnight on his cell phone. As the moment arrives, he celebrates his 30th birthday with great enthusiasm. He believes that, according to legend, men who remain virgins until they turn 30 gain the ability to use magic, and now he is eager to test this theory by attempting to conjure a fireball. However, predictably, nothing happens and he stands there looking foolish before trying to cast a lightning spell, also without success. Undeterred, he attempts a wind blast, which also fails. Next, he tries an ice storm that never materializes. Exhausted, he lies flat on his back and rests for a while, but soon recovers and fetches a small book from under his mat to try invoking a creature of both light and darkness. Once again, his attempt ends in failure, and he resigns himself to the reality that magic does not exist, and that he was foolish to keep his chastity for 30 years. Nevertheless, he goes to sleep as he has work the next day, only to suffer a sudden heart attack. Still alive, he clutches his magic book and declares he does not want to die. In the next scene, we see the young man reflecting on society. He notes that these days, a simple internet search can uncover unimaginable things, but such discoveries fail to stir his emotions. He had no hopes of progressing in life, yet the prospect of becoming a wizard had sparked an expectation within him, causing his heart to race at the mere thought of it. However, the moment to enjoy the fruits of his sacrifice revealed the harsh truth. Such things are not possible in the real world. Nevertheless, now inhabiting his new body as Cheyenne, the boy emphasizes that you'll never know unless you try. With this in mind, he really did try in these past 3 years of his new life. He studied and took initiatives, fueling his obsession. Cheyenne could not give up, and the idea that magic did not exist in this new world was something he refused to contemplate. But the more he researched, the more he was forced to confront the reality once again. When he bravely asked his father if spells existed, the man had never even heard of them. Since then, Cheyenne had lost his reason for living until the incident at the lake occurred, and he was engulfed by a strange energy never seen before. That is, something should have happened, but so far the boy had tried to cast spells with his hands, but as always he failed, and this deadly doubt tormented his heart daily, as he still could not affirm whether magic existed or not despite having encountered something very close to it. On the current day, as he reflected on this in bed, Marie enters his room without knocking. Cheyenne complains that she should announce herself, so she asks if he was doing something that couldn't be seen. Cheyenne had in mind to say that he would start doing it when he reached a certain age, but he lets it go and asks his sister to sit close to him. She had just come to tell him it was snack time, but since he asked, she approaches to chat. However, Cheyenne stares at her strangely, which prompts her to ask why. Without hesitation, the boy seriously declares his love for his sister, confirming his theory. Expressing his feelings releases magical energy, and he wonders if he will have to do this every time he wants a magical reaction, which would be quite ridiculous. Furious at her brother's antics, Marie complains that he's just using her as a toy to get what he wants, but Cheyenne replies that his feelings are genuine. Hearing this, Marianne's heart melts on the spot, and she forgives her brother without a second thought and asks what he has discovered about this matter. Cheyenne explains that it seems magical energy is released from his body when he expresses his feelings, but he doesn't believe this release is limited to just that. For this reason, he would like to test it with Marie. She asks if he's going to tell her he loves her again and says she needs to prepare her heart beforehand, but he clarifies that's not it, disappointing her. Cheyenne reflects alone that when he confesses his feelings, he becomes more aware of them, as if he were embracing his emotions. Therefore, he imagines that the path is to use emotions like amusement, hope, excitement, and happiness. Thinking this, he begins to emit magic more consciously, though he doesn't think merely shining is a big deal. However, the truth is, he has just established the existence of magic in this world, and that in itself is an incredible advancement. Over time, he discovers that this phenomenon might be similar to what electric eels do. They have things called electroreceptors that allow them to detect electric fields, serving as a special organ within them that generates electricity and can hunt prey and defend the eel from predators. In this world, humans also have an organ that allows them to sense or produce magical energy, which is why it is similar. Cheyenne named this condition for releasing this energy the magically charged state. Because of this discovery, Cheyenne could not be happier, and Marie loves to see her brother this way for the first time in his life. A month after reaching the magically charged state, the boy discovered a few things. First, to achieve this state, a certain amount of strong emotion is needed, and maintaining that level of emotion is quite difficult. The second thing is that there is a limit to how many times you can reach this state in a single day. After releasing all your magical energy, you become exhausted. Third, if you release almost all your magical energy, your total capacity will be slightly greater next time. Fourth, like orbs of light, a magically charged state cannot be perceived by those without the potential for magic, while those who have it can see and feel the heat of that energy. Still, after discovering all of this, the poor kid still can't conjure a single light orb like the ones he saw at the lake. Perhaps the limit of magical capacity he has is only enough to serve as a walking lamp of magical energy, unable to do anything more complicated than that. If that's true, Cheyenne concludes that he produces the same amount of magic as a fish, which isn't very encouraging. However, this scheme might be similar to mana points in an RPG game, where he evolves this attribute with practice time. Either way, the little mage can't give up. Now that he's come this far and discovered that magic exists, it's his duty to get up and develop himself. From what he remembers, the trout made their bodies glow and then emitted light orbs, and this gives him the idea to try moving the magical energy to his arm, but it was too intense for him to maintain the flow smoothly. After seeing the magic dissipate, he thinks of evoking a strong feeling of joy and then thinking logically to focus on his right hand, but these two processes are quite different and conflict with each other, which can make it quite difficult to achieve. However, Cheyenne realizes he reversed the order and logically thinks that he would be very happy if his right hand received magical energy. By keeping this focus in his mind, his right hand emits a light that makes the kid want to punch a wall, thinking he was super strong. But contrary to what he thought, it wasn't the wall that broke, but his own hand, which brings him back to reality once again. However, what matters is that he made progress. After that, he named this discovery of moving the magical energy in a charged state as magical grouping, and the magic in this state came to be called gathered magic. Excited about his progress, the boy intends to continue practicing magical grouping until exhausted. After that, he presents himself for training with his father alongside Marie and Rose, but the kid is exhausted and anxious. According to his father, he decided to include Cheyenne and Rose in sword training from now on, but asks everyone to avoid joking around because even wooden swords can kill people. Cheyenne raises his hand and says he doesn't intend to fight anyone, so it doesn't even make sense for him to train with this thing. But his father teaches that a sword is not only raised against people but also against the monsters that can be seen around. Rose comments that she asked to learn to use the sword and protect herself, and Marie asks her brother to make an effort, which he ends up agreeing to, although they would prefer 1,000 times to be practicing magic. Then, at the beginning of the training, Cheyenne shows the aptitude of a duck for fencing practice, while Rose seems to have great potential, so much so that Cheyenne's father believes she could become a swordswoman one day if she continues training. Lastly, the man invites Marie for a duel to assess her development. That said, the girl confidently positions herself with her wooden sword, making her brother anxious about what's about to happen. Soon, the girl quickly advances against the adult and surprises both Cheyenne and Rose with her impressive speed. She feigns a frontal strike, making her father position his sword for blocking, but she circles around to attack from below and catch the opponent off guard. However, the man jumps and escapes the blow, then places his sword on the girl's head to end the simulated fight. He teaches that his daughter's movements are very wide, but it was very clever of her to feign an attack to catch the opponent unprotected. With that praise, Marie is overjoyed, and the man adds that she will be extremely skilled in a few years, which makes the child's day. Finally, after the tedium of sword training, Cheyenne returns to what really matters: magic. After learning to accumulate light in his right hand, he tries to expel this energy from his body, but has difficulties. Still, at first he could only maintain a magically charged state a few times a day, but now he can do it about 20 times. However, compared to when he started, the growth rate has not increased anymore, so the little mage thinks about reformulating everything he's trying to do. At that time, his father opens the door of the room after knocking and asks if his son is busy now because he was thinking of going to Historia and would like the boy to come along. Cheyenne is excited about the opportunity and explains to us that Historia is a city in the Etten region where he lives. Thus, the man begins the journey and they reach the destination in the company of his wife and 2 children. Upon arrival, he announces that first they need to finish shopping, then visit the blacksmith and return home. He insists that Cheyenne and Marie stay very close to not get lost, and Cheyenne is frustrated to realize that he wouldn't have time to look for any clues about anything related to magic in the city. Anyway, as he is still a child, he can't just wander around on his own, but when he's older, he promises to return to Historia and do what he wants. Later, while her parents are inside a store, Marie lets out a laugh and Cheyenne asks why, but she deflects, saying she's just being her usual self. Finally, after her parents finish shopping, it's time to visit the blacksmith. As the man arrives at the shop, the blacksmith greets Gawain, a longtime customer, assuming he's there to pick up the sword order for his eldest daughter. Hearing this, Marie freezes, then the blacksmith introduces himself as Glass and hands her a sword suited to her size and weight with special decoration on the sheath. As she unsheathes the blade, Marianne's eyes sparkle intensely, and she can't hide the smile plastered across her face from sheer joy. On the way home, she mentions in the carriage that she feels bad because Cheyenne didn't receive anything, but the boy himself reminds her that it's her birthday, and that he is young and doesn't particularly want a sword. Amidst this, the boy spots a store that catches his attention and asks his father what it sells, but Gawain doesn't want his son to know about that store. With that, Cheyenne apologizes to the man, while storing in his memory that the store sign read, "Fairy Seller." The next day, a man was returning from collecting wood in the late afternoon and needed to get home before a storm hit, as the rain was intensifying by the minute. Suddenly, a boy came running, desperate, and fell in front of the woodcutter. The boy exclaimed that everyone had been captured and that he needed to warn the landlord. The woodcutter asked what he was talking about, and the young boy, struggling to speak, said that goblins had appeared. Meanwhile, Cheyenne continued to practice his magic with all his might, while Murray counted down 10 seconds for her brother to hold the light in his right hand. Although he succeeded this time, the boy did not seem very happy, and his sister noticed this immediately. She asked if something had happened, but Cheyenne assured her that he was excited to be able to release much more magic than before. The problem was that this by itself didn't mean much. I mean, it's cool to emit the glow, but he didn't know what it was for. Murray reached out and felt that the light was warmer than before, thinking it was because he was getting better at controlling it. With that, Murray squeezed her brother's hand and told him she loved his magic, and he felt grateful. Although he wished to do something that really seemed magical, like a fireball or lightning. Excited, he realized he needed to learn how to connect his emotions with the natural elements, while Murray tried to talk to him, but to no avail. Lost in his thoughts, the boy reflected that it wasn't just that which caught his attention. After all, fairies and monsters exist, and fairies are considered similar to natural creatures or phenomena. Hence, there is a market based on them, as seen in the town store. However, since they resemble humans, that must have been why Cheyenne's father disliked it when he showed interest in that caged fairy. At that moment, Marie raised her voice to catch her brother's attention, but their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the door opening during the storm. Downstairs, Gawain was instructing 4 men to distribute the weapons from the storage to the others. Cheyenne asked what had happened, and his father informed him that a group of goblins had appeared nearby, and they needed to eliminate them all. Although it was a threatening piece of news, the child thought this was happening at the best possible time, as he could study the goblins and learn more about magic. After the initial excitement, he took a better look at the environment and saw that the atmosphere was quite heavy, which he didn't understand since goblins are considered weak monsters. Then Gawain asked his wife to gather the women, the elderly, and the children, and bring them all there. Marianne took her brother's hand and promised that the adults would finish off the goblins, and she would do everything to protect him, even though her hand was trembling with fear. Finally, Gawain told the family that he was going to the monster's den with the men, but there was nothing to worry about, as from what was seen, there were only 2 goblins. Cheyenne shouted his father's name, who told the boy that he didn't have time for a chat now. Still, the boy wanted to know if goblins had the intelligence and physical ability to enter through the 2nd floor, and the man taught that no, they were not that clever, and since the exterior of the house was very smooth, they would never be able to climb. With that, Cheyenne suggested that the non-combatants hide on the 2nd floor and use furniture to block the 1st floor door. Gawain liked the idea and told them to follow that strategy, adding that when they returned, it would give a signal that Cheyenne could hear from upstairs. Thus, the defense preparations were made in the residence, and hours passed while the residents hid on the 2nd floor of the house. Meanwhile, outside, a goblin made a huge jump and easily surpassed the wall, then approached the house stealthily and peeked inside the 1st floor window, which was boarded up with wooden planks. Soon it went to the front door and scratched it several times, and the noise could be heard from above. Marie asked if it was their father, but Cheyenne was sure it wasn't. The sound began to get louder and more frightening, making the inhabitants increasingly terrified. However, after a few seconds of tension, the noise stopped, but soon after, a window was heard being broken. That is, the goblin had entered. Marie began to talk non-stop to find out what was happening, but her brother asked her to be quiet. The steps of the monster could be heard going up the stairs to the 2nd floor, and the tension grew among the hidden humans, who did everything not to make any noise and give away their position. After some time, the people heard the goblin passing by the door where they were, which brought some relief. But when a thunder scared a mother with her daughter, the 2 screamed, and the goblin discovered where the humans were and started banging on the door. Without much delay, it managed to invade the room and stood before the people. Seeing that, Cheyenne couldn't believe he wanted to study such a creature. His mother stepped forward and asked the goblin not to kill the children, but she ended up falling, provoking a laugh from the monster. It was at this time that Cheyenne noticed that this goblin fully understood that it was much stronger than everyone there and that it controlled the situation as it wanted. Marie, in an act of bravery, unsheathed her sword and pointed it at the enemy. Shen begged her to come back, but the girl remembered she had sworn to protect her brother and wasn't going to give up now. However, the goblin slapped the sword out of Marie's hand and stuck the blade into the wall. After that, it advanced towards the child and swung its claws, but the mother stood in front of her and was struck in the back. Marie screamed her name, but the woman didn't have the strength to react to the severe wound. Seeing that his mother and sister were about to be killed in front of him, Cheyenne acted on impulse and grabbed the monster's arm. Rose asked what the boy was doing, then he knew holding an arm wouldn't make any difference, but he soon noticed that his body was emitting magical energy and struggled to gather more and more of that energy to transmit to the goblin. Around them, people without the gift of sorcery understand nothing, as they cannot see the energy emitted. Yet the truth is that the monster seems affected somehow, to the point of reacting by isolating Cheyenne against the wall. Soon after, it clutches its burned arm and writhes in pain on the ground, while Cheyenne seizes the opportunity to cast the magic cluster again, this time targeting the creature's head. With all his might, he focuses on maintaining the flow of mana until the goblin stops thrashing. Trembling with fear, the boy notices the burn on his hand and wonders if he killed the monster, while the onlookers try to comprehend what just happened. However, some of them stare at the boy as if he were some sort of aberration, unsettling him even more. On the other hand, Rose insists that it was thanks to him that everyone was saved, but the truth is that not everyone was so lucky. By this time, Cheyenne's mother appears close to death. Marie is in despair while Rose tells the boy to take care of Emma as she will tend to Marie. He notices his mother is pale and has lost a lot of blood, so he needs to stop the bleeding as quickly as possible, but he can't treat her on the ground. At that moment, other women arrive and learn what happened, so the child asks for help to move Emma to a bed. Having done this, he asks if anyone present has experience in medicine or pharmacy, but being a small village, none of the residents have such knowledge. Trying to stay calm, Cheyenne thinks back to his past life memories for what to do in such situations. In the movies and series he watched, the first step was to stitch the wound, so he wants to know if anyone is capable of doing that. When a young woman raises her hand, Cheyenne asks her to fetch the sewing supplies from Emma's room, while others should look for strong spirits and all the clean cloth they can find. As for the rest, as unpleasant as it is, they need to move the goblin's corpse to the corridor. Before heading off to help, a boy slightly younger than Cheyenne grabs his hand and thanks him, which motivates the young mage. Sometime later, when all the necessary materials are gathered, Cheyenne asks the seamstress's name, who introduces herself as Leah. He cuts open his mother's clothing and sees that the wound is indeed ugly, but not as deep as he thought. The problem is if the goblin had poison in its claws, but since this is the only chance to save his mother, the boy doesn't even want to think about it. Thus, he asks the seamstress to perform the suture, to stitch the wounds. The girl is shocked and asks why she needs to do this, and Cheyenne realizes that suturing hasn't been discovered in this world yet. He explains that if it's not closed, the wound will remain exposed, which is very dangerous, but Leah thinks that this will hurt her lady even more. With that, Cheyenne asks if Leah prefers to hurt Emma and save her or not hurt her and let her die. But as the seamstress starts panicking, the boy changes tactics and pleads for the maid's help, who grasps the gravity of the situation and begins the process. Hours after the stitching, Emma is comfortably lying in bed and should recover without major issues. Cheyenne thanks the maid for her great help. Marie can no longer hold back and begins to cry as she embraces her brother, who tries to hold back his tears as he reciprocates the gesture of affection. Amidst this, they hear the men returning from their expedition. Later, Cheyenne learns that his father and the others found the goblin lair in the nearby forest and killed 2 of them, but they discovered traces of 2 more monsters and hurried back to the village. Fortunately, no one died in the battle and peace returned to the village once again. A doctor was called to assess Emma's condition, and he says that although the wounds were deep, they did not reach any bones or organs. Moreover, the injury was stitched up very well, which helped greatly. From here, all she needs is good nutrition and rest, and Emma will be as good as new. When the doctor leaves, Marie tells her mother that it was her fault for what happened, but the woman takes her daughter's hand and says no, because the girl was brave and tried to protect everyone, and should be proud of herself. Later, in a conversation with his younger son, Gawain shares that he learned about everything that happened and that it fits with what Sheehan said. He also heard that the boy treated their mother, and honestly, the man doesn't know how the child was able to do all this. Inside, Cheyenne knows the answer is that he's a 30-year-old Japanese man, but of course, he can't say that, so he just says he was winging it. With that, the father asks how the boy killed the goblin and what that burn mark was, but the child is too nervous to answer and remains silent. At this, Gawain assumes it was magic, and Cheyenne asks how he knows. The father notes that the son has always been very logical and doesn't even act like a child, but what gave him away was the way he always talks about magic. Since it's come to this, Cheyenne asks his father to believe what he's about to say, while Marie says her brother is amazing and has been researching a lot about magic. Gawain knew the kid acted like an adult, but this is too much. By the way, he orders that neither of them speak to anyone about this because if others find out, bad things can happen, as there are certain topics that are not accepted in society. Speaking of which, the man orders his son to stop studying magic, as it is a dangerous power. Marie complains that her brother has been working hard on it and that it was only because of this that he managed to save everyone, but the father cannot allow the boy to meddle with something so perilous. Despite the order, Cheyenne stands his ground and insists that he will continue his research. Gawain raises his voice to argue, and the boy understands his father's feelings, but makes it clear that magic is his great dream and that he depends on it for happiness. Gawain argues that Cheyenne is still a child and that his thoughts on the matter will change. Then the boy proposes a condition. If his presence becomes a nuisance to others, he will be disowned. The father can't understand how his son would go to such lengths over this, especially knowing that he could be ostracized by everyone. But seeing the boy's conviction, Gawain throws in the towel and allows Cheyenne to continue his research, provided he can be monitored by his father. Furthermore, seeing that the boy was determined to this extent, Gawain encourages him to hold his head high and pursue his dreams, as the father will always be by his side. Hey guys, the source will be in the comments. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming videos. See you.